Festival like this is a beautiful indication of the kind of thing that I truly, truly believe in, and I think makes our society more whole and more pure.
We do not take it for granted that Boulder was chosen as the first North American satellite festival. It's a huge honor we will not forget, and we are enriched because of it. We are indebted to both the local and international people that came together to make that happen, and we hope it's a tradition that continues for decades to come.
Literary festivals like this one build up an environment and an ecosystem to nurture readers and to promote the business of books. They provide an invaluable forum for writers to connect with other creative people.
We sit there peering into those electronic grids in front of our eyes, and it only increases the desire to see the real thing in the flesh. To actually hear an author speak firsthand, to read from their work, to hear the tones of their voice modulate as they read their most treasured passages of prose.
For us, it's special. This was our mothership, and it continues to be. The other editions that we have across the United States are smaller versions, different programming, but smaller versions. On behalf of Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, all my colleagues at Teamwork Arts and JLF Colorado, the Boulder Public Library and the City of Boulder, welcome to this session, Waiting for the Vaccine, William A. Haseltine and Ambarish Satwik in conversation. As society waits for a vaccine for the COVID-19 virus, a timely conversation on social realities and medical routes to help the world exit the limbo it finds itself in. Scientist, author, and philanthropist William Haseltine is the founder of two academic research departments, the Division of Biochemical Pharmacology and the Division of Human Retrovirology at the Harvard School of Public Health. Ambarish Satwik is a vascular and endovascular surgeon and writer. William Haseltine is an infectious disease expert and author of numerous books, including his latest, My Lifelong Fight Against the Disease, from Polio and AIDS to COVID-19. Dr. Haseltine currently serves as the president of the global health think tank, Access Health International. His work revolves around cancer, HIV, AIDS, genomics, and COVID-19. He's come out with two new ebooks, a family guide to COVID and COVID back to school, and a third COVID commentaries during this period. Ambarish Satwik is a vascular and endovascular surgeon and writer. He's a director of the Vascular Cath Lab at Sri Gangaram Hospital and professor of vascular surgery at the Gangaram Institute for Postgraduate Medical Education and Research. He is the author of the critically acclaimed novel Perineum, Nether Parts of the Empire. We're also delighted to have Lanchura as our podcast partner for this session, and there will be question and answers post the conversation. So do please send these in, and we will ask Ambarish to pose these of William Haseltine. All our sessions, as you know, are available to view on our Facebook page, JLF LitFest, and on our YouTube channel, Jaipur LitFest JLF. For our upcoming sessions, please remember to log on to jlflitfest.org/Colorado for the entire program. As you all know, we've really struggled to bring you JLF Colorado and all the JLFs across the world, and we're hanging in there, the skin of our teeth. We're doing this mostly without charging a registration fee. Please, if you can, if it's possible, donate as generously as possible to ensure a free, seamless, and continued flow of knowledge and information, which is the reason why we created JLF Online pretty much from April 4th. Ladies and gentlemen, waiting for the vaccine, William A. Haseltine and Ambarish Satwik in conversation. Ambarish, William, over to you.
Thank you, Sanjay. And I'm delighted and honored to be here in conversation with the very illustrious Dr. Haseltine. And I'm perfectly aware that I'm here in my capacity as a sort of fly in the champagne. You will get, obviously, several mouthfuls of champagne in the form of Dr. Haseltine, but you'll have to suffer the occasional mouthful of fly in the form of Ambarish Satwik. So welcome, Dr. Haseltine. And we're here, I think, largely fueled by circumstance, to discuss one of the great kind of metaphysical mysteries of the living world, the virus, which is not even properly a living organism. It's just a complex assembly of molecules that has no capacity to grow, metabolize, reproduce, no organs of locomotion, but yet we find that we're all down on our knees on account of this very complex and very curious critter. But we're doing this in the wake of news, both from the Pfizer Corporation and Moderna, that we might have a reasonably efficacious vaccine to look forward to. So, Dr. Haseltine, are you breathlessly excited? Do you think this is going to be the savior of our imperiled bacon?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to talk a little bit about the viruses before we begin the conversation of the vaccine, since you gave such a humanistic introduction of these small entities. I think the most fundamental question of what is life? I worked on that question as a undergraduate when we were trying to understand was there life on Mars, and leading up to the first flyby mission. Actually, my first scientific paper was on the subject of is there life on Mars? And to understand that question, you have to understand life. And to me, life is any system that's capable of reproduction in its greater environment, change, mutation, and changing, and then reproducing those changes that occur. So it has the capability to adapt to its environment. As it happens, the greater living world is its ecosystem. I believe our viruses are alive. They do adapt. They meet all the criteria for life if you include the living world as part of their ecosystem. But from this particular perspective, you have to think of viruses as intelligent machines, as code crackers. And like all living forms, they have to adapt to their environment. Let's take what's happened with SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19. It's adapted to a brand new ecological niche called 7.5 billion human beings, and the way we live, the way we communicate, and the way we organize ourselves. And if you look through history, there have been successful coronaviruses of this family. There are 4 of them in constant circulation. They come back and infect you every single year, whether you've been infected or not. In some cases, they actually know the same virus has infected the same person 4 times in 6 years. That's a feature of these viruses. They've cracked some kind of immunological code that once you've had it, you can get it again. It's kind of like the flu, but it's the same virus. It's not a different virus. But this particular strain has cracked a very interesting code. That is, it's cracked our biological code so it can get into us. It's cracked a transmission code. It lies doggo. It causes almost no symptoms in 85, 90% of the people that they infect. They're a very mild cold. They go around spreading it. And then it makes maybe 15 or 20% of people at most seriously ill. And depending on where you are in the world, it will kill 0.1 to 1% of the people. It's like polio. Most people don't realize that for every one person paralyzed, 200 people had polio. They just didn't know it. And for every 2,000 people 1 out of every 2,000 people died who got it. So it's very much like COVID. And we hope the solution will be very much the same, which is a vaccine. But it terrorized my young life. And I have to say, what I'm watching with my grandchildren is what I lived through. Don't go out, don't go swimming. It was not a winter virus, it was a summer virus. It's a oral fecal transmission and waterborne. Don't go to the swimming pool, all the things that you're hearing now we had to do. And then all of a sudden there was a vaccine and life changed, went back to normal. And we forgot that there's this code cracker out there, these intelligent machines making trillions of experiments every day, trying to get us. That's how we should think of our natural environment. And we forget that. This is a reminder not to forget. This won't be the last one in young people's lifetime. It will happen again and again. Polio, AIDS has killed 37 million people so far. This virus is a piker compared to AIDS, although it does it a bit faster. And it's really tearing through America. So that's sort of the overall picture. And the code that it's cracked that I find particularly interesting is a socio-political code. It turns out that some human organizations, countries, can control this without a vaccine and without a drug. They happen to be mostly in East Asia, not in Southeast Asia, in East Asia. China, a country of 1.4 billion people, had a raging epidemic in one of their major cities and shut it down within 3 months. And there's no COVID in China, except an occasional sporadic case that comes in from the outside. It might be frozen on the outside of a cod from South America. It might be a traveler who's come in surreptitiously, but it's very sporadic. They basically have had no deaths for months. It's controlled. Now, what they can't do is they can't leave China. It's a controlled area of 1/5 of humanity next to the raging epidemic that is India, next to the raging epidemic that is Russia, surrounded on the western side by Central Asia, where there's a raging epidemic. They're careful. They have to be careful. But it shows that it can be controlled. But what's happened in the rest of the world? What's happened in Europe? What's happened in America? What's happened in South America? And what's happened in India? It's a breakdown of either society or the socio-political code. And it's not just in one country. It's in many countries. And that is a deep question to ponder. The virus figured it out by what I call machine intelligence, just random code cracking, throwing a lot of combinations. Our job is to do something different. Now, evolution, we can now understand in a different way. Evolution is what machine intelligence is, throwing random changes at the environment and seeing what fits. So we can understand evolution as we understand machine intelligence and artificial intelligence. And as you can remember, artificial intelligence can be chess masters. So it can be pretty tricky. And this one has cracked a political code, socio-political code. So it's a very interesting thing. So, but what has nature also done? Nature has evolved intelligence, our intelligence. And the difference between what we can do and what other living systems can do is we can adapt in a generation, and we can even adapt in a day. I was just speaking before we opened how we've all adapted to COVID. I'm living in a country home that I never thought I would do in a million years. After growing up in a small country town, I never wanted to go back. I'm happy to be here, I can tell you. That's adaptation. And it's intelligence, the evolution of intelligence that allows us to adapt to change within a single lifespan. We don't have to wait for evolution to take place. We can adapt. That's intelligence that allows us to adapt to circumstance. Now, what is a major adaptation? And I'm getting to vaccines, believe it or not. China has its way of adapting, and the West is trying to solve it a different way by making a vaccine. So we don't have to worry about it anymore. Chinese want vaccines too. And they're actually the first ones to start making and using vaccines. Why? It's a little bit of a mystery because there's no COVID in China. What are they worried about? Invading India? The first people they gave it to was their military. Why does the Chinese military need COVID when there's no COVID in China? Interesting question. They are face to face with Indians up there in the mountains somewhere. And Indians sure have plenty of COVID to give them if they want to get it. So there is some reason for it, but it's not the reason that we do it. We do it because, frankly, we're facing a total disaster. We're headed toward, right now, 200,000 people a day that we know are getting infected, which means over 1 million a day are getting infected. And of the 200,000 who get infected a day, about 1% will die in this country. That's 2,000 people every day, more than a death a minute. It's headed to twice that, which is going to get to in a couple of weeks if we don't do something drastic, which we're not going to do because we're politically paralyzed. So we're trying to find a vaccine. That's sort of a background for vaccines. Our solution is let's have medicine solve this problem for it, solve a problem that society can't. So that's where we are. Now, I'm happy to answer very specific questions if you have them about where we are with the vaccines, what they might do, what they don't do, what we know, etc. But it is a story of trying to find a biomedical solution to a problem that other people have solved without it.
Indeed. I'm absolutely fascinated by the sort of evolutionary intelligence that you speak of. And perhaps microscopic pathogens tend to exhibit this kind of evolutionary intelligence, a kind of tribal species intelligence more than more complex organisms. And for the people who are listening in, I'm happy to offer 2 examples of this kind of intelligence. Now, I mean, as we discussed, that the virus, once it gets inside your system, it can make the host do funny things because it has to actually, to disseminate, get outside the host and infect other people, to jump onto other hosts, to infect other hosts. So it makes the host do funny things like sneeze, cough, spit out, vomit, explode in diarrheas, bleed out of its pores. It knows no righteousness in that sense. Now, consider for a moment the pathogen toxoplasma, which causes toxoplasmosis. Now, this is a pathogen that can only sexually reproduce in the intestines of a cat. And it's defecated out of the cat's intestines and then contaminates the soil. And then you've got animals and birds eating the contaminated plant matter and getting infected. Now, let's say when a rat consumes contaminated plant matter and gets infected with toxoplasma, it can't exit the system because it can't sexually reproduce in the intestines of the cat. It invades the neural tissues, the muscle tissues of the rat, of the rodent, but it can't exit. So it does something very curious. It travels to the brain of the rat, of the rodent. It doesn't cause any great physical violence there, but it holds sway over various parts of the brain, making the rat perform acts of glandular fearlessness, of recklessness. It makes the cat not afraid of the rat, so it's more likely to get eaten. And that's how it's a kind of curious way of exiting the body of the rodent where it cannot sexually reproduce. It has to kind of game the system. Consider rabies, for instance. From the locus of the bite of the rabid animal, the virus moves into neural tissues, goes to the brain, causes severe inflammatory responses in the brain, causes hallucination, delirium, confusion, spasm, all of that. But it has to exit the animal to then disseminate itself and spread to other animals. So it then starts spreading through the salivary glands of the rabid animal. It causes spasms in the throat of the animal that is infected. So the animal, the poor thing, can't even swallow its own saliva. And therefore the saliva keeps foaming out incontinently. And what is the only thing that a dying, delirious, confused animal can do? It can try and bite the demons that are causing it pain. So the animal goes around running, trying to bite anyone and everyone in its path. So effectively, the frothing and the foaming at the mouth of a rabid animal is the virus trying to satisfy life's longing for itself. It's a curious kind of species intelligence that you speak of, and it's fascinating.
But it'd be more fascinating if it weren't killing somebody of us. It'd be great to study with the rats and the cats.
Indeed,
And rats. I think it'd be much better.
But coming to the vaccine,
we're going to be able to solve this with a vaccine. It looks as if we are, at least temporarily. Now, there's some peculiarities of coronaviruses that raise serious questions that have not been really addressed by these vaccines. We think of a vaccine as something that, number one, prevents you from getting infected. By the way, almost no vaccine, there's no vaccine that actually does that. You get infected and you remember you've got it, so you shut it down quickly. It's kind of like a fire alarm. Wastebasket catch fire, and before the house can burn down, the firemen come. That's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to stop you from getting sick, and it's supposed to stop you from dying. And ideally, it stops it from being transmitted from one person to another. Now, you'd be surprised to know that neither polio nor flu viruses stop you from getting infected. What they do is they stop, especially polio, from you getting ill from it. You don't get sick from it if you've got the vaccine. It doesn't go into your nervous system. It gets in the rest of your body. With influenza, it only works to attenuate the disease in about 30 to 50% of people, depending on the year. But it doesn't stop transmission. But it works enough that we're happy to take it. At least some of us are. It doesn't work very well for old people. You've got to give us a whopping dose. If you're over, by the way, old by this standard is 45. So my guess is almost everybody's listening is old. And the flu vaccines, unless you take the whopping dose, the 4 times dose isn't going to do you much good. So what do we expect from these vaccines that are being developed? We expect that they'll not stop infection, but they'll stop us from getting sick. And so far, it looks like these 2 out of the 200 that are being tried are going to do that. And my suspicion is 100 out of the 200 are going to work to do that. That's the first thing to say. Will it stop some people from getting sick? No, because at least 10% of the people who had the vaccine were infected and got sick. And so some of them are going to get very sick and some of them are going to die. But it's going to massively, if it works the way we think it will, change the disease trajectory of this, which will be very satisfying. But if you look at these viruses evolved a particular trick, which is they get you, and next year, the same guy comes back and gets you again. And the year after that, the same guy comes back and gets you again. And that can go on for your entire lifetime. These viruses are trickier than the flu. They don't have to change to get you. There was recently a study done where one guy got exactly the same virus 4 times in 6 years. And as far as I know, it's a few years later, he's gotten the same virus again, even though there were other viruses circulating. So that's one question. How does a virus do it? Does it do it by messing up the immune system when it goes out? Or does it have some tricks up its sleeve so it sort of puts out the fire, turns off the fire alarm? That is very dangerous for vaccines because we depend on that fire alarm for vaccines to work. But this virus can get back into somebody who's already been infected. And how often that happens seems pretty often. And it can happen fast, 6 weeks to 8 weeks so far. We've seen people reinfected within 6 to 8 weeks. So is the vaccine really going to work? Is it durable? Will you need a booster like you do with polio? Well, there's a lot of the vaccines that are being developed, particularly the one that the Serum Institute is developing for the British, is only usable once because it's in a vector which you recognize and then shut down. They can't use it again. And if you need it, a booster every year or every other year, you can't use that vaccine. Now, India is a very interesting place for vaccines. I've traveled the length and breadth of India, met with almost all your vaccine manufacturers. You've got great ones you supply, maybe more than a third of the total world's vaccines, maybe half even. And if there's going to be a vaccine solution to the world, it's going to come from India. You're going to have simple, stable, cheap vaccines. And I'm pretty sure we're going to have those within 2 years. And they mostly will come out of India. The ones we're developing, the ones you've mentioned, Pfizer, you have to keep it at minus 70 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 90 degrees centigrade for, or vice versa, for most of the time. Where can you do that? And even the Moderna vaccine, you've got to keep damn cold for a long time. We are developing vaccines that are very heat stable. And as I say, I'm convinced that most of those will come out of the India Biofirst, whether it's Bharat, whether it's the Serum Institute, whether it's BioE, you name it, there's a whole series of capabilities there, whether it's Biocon, somebody will in India, or many people in India will be making them, and they're used to making them in the billions of doses. And that's where they're going to come from. Now, will they stop transmission? Don't know. That's a real question. Will they have nasty side effects? Some surely will. Will they actually potentiate the virus coming back in? Maybe. There's a lot of unknowns. We're seeing the most positive face of the vaccine right now is being used in the people who are best at making antibody responses, which are young people. It's being used immediately. These people you're looking at are not getting sick, aren't relying on the memory response of the vaccine. They're relying on the actual antibodies you make. It's like pumping somebody full of artificial antibodies. You've given them the antigen, they're newly vaccinated, and that's very different from somebody who's vaccinated a year ago. We have no idea what's going to protect people a year later. We hope it will. It might. But these viruses, remember, are really tricky. They've solved a problem other viruses wish they could solve, which is to come back unchanged every year. And by the way, it's not a small fraction of people. 1/3 of every cold you get is one of these viruses come back to get you. Every year you get a coronavirus infection. Every one of us. I would warrant there's very few people who I'm listening who've not had 1 or 2 colds in the last year. And the chances are greater than 50% that was a coronavirus that's coming back to get you again. So there are some really serious issues about how well these are going to work. But the good news is they are going to work, at least to some extent. And it's going to have some impact. My short-term fear is different from that. Once people think there's a solution, they may get even sloppier. Now you ask yourself, how can you get even ever sloppier than an exponential expansion of a viral infection, which we're having now in the United States? And it's really hard to imagine that. All you can imagine is a bigger end to the exponential, bigger number, so that it gets a little steeper when people relax even more. But from a sociologist point of view, it's so interesting for me to just to watch. For example, if you want to see where the virus took off this summer, you look at the vacation dates in Spain, which are earlier than those in France, and it took off before. You can look when Greece got it. It's when Englishmen and a few other people went to Greece for the summer. You actually watch in real time. You watch what happens when people come back from holiday and start recongregating. Boom. There's another aspect of this disease. I've worked a lot with AIDS, and everybody knows AIDS is a sexually transmitted disease. They don't think of sex and COVID. This is not the words that go together. But COVID is a sexually transmitted disease. And why do I say that? Let me ask you, can you have sex without getting together? Sure, you can have internet sex, but sex is something where people get together. And when people get together, this virus transmits really well. And if you're looking at a lot of the drivers, it's young people's need to have sex. It's driving the infection. How long can you keep an 18 to 25-year-old locked up in a single apartment? It's not a reasonable thing to ask of a human being. It's actually against our biological imperatives. We're not wired for that. And this virus knows it. Just like the AIDS virus knew that it could get around with sex in a very predictable way. These viruses figure us out. And they figured out that young people might not get sick, but boy, can they make older people sick. And by the way, let's take America, and when you're talking about who's susceptible, fat people, I should say obese, people are susceptible. What's fat? Body mass index over 30. What fraction of Americans have a body mass over 30? 37%. And in the Midwest, it's over 50%. This virus loves those people because it's a great depot for the virus, and those people have higher inflammation. So it's a great place for these viruses to grow and make people sick. And if you ask what's the difference between different groups, one of them is how fat people are or how obese people are. It makes a big difference. So there's other really interesting things. And I'm sure that our kind doctor here is very interested in why the death rate in India is so much lower from this infection than it is in other countries. It's low in Africa too. They're really interesting things to find out about this virus and what it does and how it causes disease. But good news is vaccines are coming, not for people in India, probably for a year before it's widely available. If it is then, that depends on a lot of other factors. And then it will probably lessen the impact of the disease where you are, but it's already low. And so it's not going to make a huge difference to your country. It makes some difference. For our country, it probably allow us to keep our economy going, which is a big deal.
Right. So I have two questions for you fundamentally. First of all, as you said that it's unlikely that some of the developing countries are not going to get the vaccine at least for a year, and roughly there are about 180 vaccine candidates under trial, but I think about just 7 or 8 of them are currently undergoing phase 3 human trials. There's been this large growing concern of whether or not we should have challenge trials, because that's the only way of expediting the trial and getting a vaccine much sooner. In fact, there's this website called onedaysooner.org, which gives you statistics to the effect that if you're able to deliver a vaccine 1 month in advance, if you're able to shorten the pandemic by a month, you'll end up saving about 720,000 lives. And that's only possible if you carry out challenge trials. Where do you stand?
I've got my blood pressure up a little bit. I have written a number of articles with the title, Challenge Trials for SARS-CoV-2 is unnecessary, uninformative, and unethical. Let's take the ethics first. Who wants to give somebody a virus for which there's no cure that can kill them or maim them for life? Nobody wants to do that. And that's what they're proposing to do. Okay? It's unnecessary. How many people are getting infected every day? In your country, 30,000, 40,000. In our country, 200,000 a day. That's not enough. How many is enough? You don't need challenge trials to get people to be infected quickly. And uninformative because they use young people, very young people who are totally healthy. You're not going to give this virus to an old sick person who really needs it, a vaccine. So it's uninformative. And, I think the ethics alone to knock it out of the box. And already we have proof that you don't need it to get to where we want to be. Now, there's another question about the distribution, and that's why I mentioned India as a source. The virus has got to be heat stable. The vaccine has got to be heat stable. It's got to be cheap. It's got to be able to be manufactured in large quantities quickly. Those vaccines are coming. And I'm pretty sure they'll work as well as these fancy vaccines. The fancy vaccines had to start because the manufacturing technology is simpler. It's a very good idea for rich countries. And maybe someday it'll be a good idea for poorer countries. But the technology is so refined, it's only going to work for rich countries for the moment. So great as a proof of principle that it can work, not great for the world. Okay? And people cut all sorts of safety corners. Nobody's inspecting the factories where it's made. Nobody's making you make multiple batches like you have to do for everything else. Our whole distribution system hasn't been worked out. The transportation system is a mess. You're going to see a big mess. It's going to kind of look like the testing mess. And you're going to see different groups fighting with each other. I want it. Well, guess what? Maybe it'll help you, maybe it won't. But the people whose lives it's going to save aren't going to get their hands on it for the most part. The people in America that really need it are minorities, the Latinos and the Blacks in poor communities. And they may say that's going to be the first people to get it. In a pig's eye, it's not going to happen. This is not how we're set up.
Right.
We don't have systems that allow that to happen. It's really kind of horrifying, but that's what the story is.
Right. And because we're running out of time, I'll just one more question that I thought I should pose to you. You mentioned that this is a constantly evolving virus. This is a smart virus. And as it's plain for everybody to see that the case fatality rate of the virus is declining. And it's possibly because the milder variants are being spread around more because people are able to move around with milder infections, and the more severe forms are sequestered either in hospitals
Well,
or
let me challenge
isolated.
that. I don't think that's true.
Okay.
I've seen no evidence that any strain is less virulent than any other. I have seen evidence that a strain is more transmissible. The strains that now circulating in the world became about 10 times more transmissible than the one that started in Wuhan. There was a single mutation that happened somewhere in Europe, probably in March, and now it's spread all over the world. But in terms of disease, I don't see. I think the difference in disease has to do with a number of different things. My personal belief is what's happening in your country is that you are much more resistant to toxic shock. You as a doctor know that the average Indian will not suffer toxic shock the way an average Englishman would or an average American. You are so subjected to so many different pathogens that you build up resistance to toxic shock. And I've seen that in ORs. You know, when I've asked my friends who are doing open heart surgery, how can you do that? Under these conditions, they say, well, these people are going to live. If I did it to you, you'd die. But these people are going to live. And by the way, I expose myself constantly, these friends tell me, to a lot of conditions. So I'm resistant also, because if I get what they got, I'd be in trouble too. So that's one explanation. Another is youth, who gets it, what the age distribution of the country is. And of course, another one is how many people you test. When people, at first, if you have a testing system that says, I'm only going to test those people who come in for tests, okay, because they're sick or they're bothered or they think they have some reason or they're psychotic or whatever reason it is, I'm going to just catch a small fraction. How small a fraction? In India, about 1/100th. There's a big debate. Is it 1/20th or 1/100th that we catch, right? That's the debate. It isn't that we're catching 9 out of 10. We're not. We're not even catching 1 out of 10 in India. In the US, we catch about 1 out of 5. So that's another variable that tells you if there's a big population that you have a population that's small and all of a sudden you start testing more and more people, you're picking up more and more asymptomatics. So it looks like your death rate is dropping. A key thing to watch is how many people who come in critically ill die. That ratio has been pretty constant, except for some medical changes, which have like use of heparin and blood thinners and things like that. That ratio has changed. Treating people. But if you look at that ratio of people get really sick and almost die and need to be saved is about the same. There's about 20% of people who need to be hospitalized because their oxygen levels are below like 92. Have about the same ratio of getting very seriously ill and need heroic measures to save them, like an ECMO machine.
Right. Well, those figures are slightly different for India, but anyway, I think we must move on to some of the questions from the audience. There's one particular question by Rachel who's saying that you've been speaking of the virus reintroducing itself in waves. Do you think that with the vaccine, the world will be the same again? We'll go back to our old ways of life, or do you think it'll be any different? And there's another question while I'm at it from Keith, who's saying that there are claims by vaccine manufacturers, particularly Pfizer and Moderna. Moderna is saying about 94 to 95% efficacy, and the WHO is saying that the vaccine in the short term will not end this nightmare. So Keith asks, is there any hope for us to get out of it?
Well, there is, of course, hope. One thing we can hope is our political leadership in whatever country we're in wakes up and decides to do the right thing. In European countries, there's maybe waking up. But in the United States, we're in a hopeless mess. The political quandary we're in is just horrifying to watch. And every night it gets worse. And we don't see any way out until the president changes. And even then, things will be so bad. It's going to be a nightmare. And the vaccine is not going to save us. You know, Tony Fauci, who's now a world famous figure, I don't need to tell you who he is, said the cavalry is coming, just for, hold on, cavalry's coming. Reminds me of that the movies where the cowboys and Indians are fighting, the cavalry's coming to save them. Except this time the wagon trains will be burned, the forts will be overrun. It's going to be the homesteads will be burned to the ground, and you've seen those images too, because the cavalry is getting here late. If there is a vaccine, and that's going to be for most of the world. We're not getting it in time for this winter, just not. And we'd be damn lucky to get it for the rest of much of the world by next winter. Very lucky to get it. And then in terms of efficacy, yeah, maybe in the groups they tried it, it's 95% effective in reducing the severity of disease in young people who don't get disease anyway. What are they talking about? Colds. You know what those criteria for sick is? A sniffle, a headache, and a cough. That's what they're talking about. Oh, these people don't get a sniffle, a headache, and a cough. And these people do. Well, that isn't what people want. There are some serious cases, like 11 out of 100, that got really sick without the vaccine. That's what they want. You don't want, and none in the group that was vaccinated. That's what you want. But is it going to be the same in older people, sick people, the people that this virus is knocking off? We have no idea yet. So it's certainly not going to be 90% effective. 50% maybe, 60% maybe, kind of like the flu. And like the flu, this thing is now endemic, I think, and is going to come back every year and get us again. So we're going to have to be constantly vigilant. So will life be the same? I think that there are going to be huge changes. First of all, if you're a businessman, you're saying, oh my God, I've got to diversify my supply chain. I've got a single supply chain and it starts in China and that's over. I've got to have multiple supply chains and I've got to have them proximal as well. Just in time is over. It's finished. So people are going to have stockpiles of almost everything. That's going to change business in some fundamental ways. Good, bad, different. Second thing is, it's going to globalize the supply chain, which bad for China, good for the rest of the world. People are going to be working remotely. You know, we've learned that you can have this meeting remotely. Who thought the Jaipur Book Festival would not be in Jaipur or wherever, Boulder, wherever it takes place, and we'd be talking this way? Who thought that, you know, my daughters, my stepdaughters who graduated, one of them studying to be a medical student, even her cadaver courses and her laboratory courses are virtual. Try to figure that out, but that's what they're figuring out. That's changed. And how much are we going to pay? Are you going to pay Harvard that huge fee for a virtual education? No, you're not. What's going to happen to universities and the whole structure of universities? And then entertainment. What's going to happen at entertainment? When are you going to be comfortable sitting cheek by jowl with 40,000 people for a soccer match? Maybe a while, maybe a short while for some people, but a longer while for other people. So, right. And you know, your country is peculiarly crowded, let's say. Are people going to change? Well, they can't get away from the crowds. You know, Mumbai is the densest city in the world. How are going to people live? How are we going to create our environments? Those are things that I think lots of people are thinking about. So life may get more back to normal, but it's going to be a different normal.
Right. So we're almost at the end of our time for this session, but there's many more questions. I'll perhaps pick a couple of them. Edna is asking, what's the evidence on the epidemic trajectory with and without non-pharmaceutical and pharmaceutical interventions? And, you know, just one more question from my side. So the mRNA vaccines that—
answer that question very quickly.
Right.
First, and the answer to that question is, it depends on governance, leadership, governance, and social solidarity. If you got good leadership, good governance, and good social solidarity, medicine doesn't make a damn bit of difference. You'll solve the problem. If you don't have it, medicine may make a difference, but it's going to be a lot harder and slower.
Right. Excellent.
Public health is the answer to this problem, not medicine.
Absolutely. And I think perhaps a final question from my side, which is that the two successful vaccine candidates that we have information on that have been revealed to us, both of them are mRNA vaccine candidates. This is the first time perhaps this technology is being introduced and used for vaccine production, and we have just interim results for 2 months on safety, would you be comfortable in advocating a vaccine for mass use with 2 months of safety outcomes? Then do you
No.
think the FDA should approve a vaccine for just 2 months?
Going to approve it. I hope they don't. I hope they don't even give it emergency use authorization. There's other categories for expanded use, or expanded tests that they can give, which I think they may do. It'll be dangerous to do that without adequate safety data. And actually there are many fundamental blocking and tackling things like inspecting manufacturing plants, looking at stability, looking at the transportation network. All those things are going to be important. But the thing that's important to remember is if we were speaking about this a month from now, there'll be 3 other vaccines that have already announced their results. And they have very different characteristics from these. They're much more heat stable. They're technologies that are a bit further along, not very far along. And you have to remember, the Russians are testing their vaccine now since August. It hasn't made any difference to the massive epidemic there, but they've been testing it, so we're going to get some results from there. And we may get some results from China, although, as I say, it's peculiar because there's no COVID in China. So they have to test it elsewhere. But we're going to have a conversation a month from now. It'll be very different from focusing on Pfizer and Moderna. And that's good news.
Right, indeed. I think with that, we're practically out of the time allotted to us. It's been absolutely delightful, Dr. Haseltine. Thank you for joining us, and I offer Sanjoy to intervene to wind up the session.
Thank you, and it's great to see you, Sanjoy, again, and to be part of the Jaipur Book Festival. I just wish I was in Jaipur.
Thank you so much, William. Thank you, Ambarish, and absolutely, we need to get you out to Jaipur, especially to study all of the vaccine manufacturing around the country. So maybe in January or February. But as you said, life.
I don't think this January, February, next year, the year after that. As they say it as Jewish Seder, next year in Jerusalem. Next year in Jaipur.
But for those of you who are listening, do remember what he said, that the virus is here to stay. It will probably come back again and again and again. And the need of the moment is a virus that is going to be heat stable, cheap, and can be manufactured in large quantities to be able to get it across to the world much in need. Thank you both. That was absolutely fascinating. Much to think about, much to worry about, especially as you said, entertainment. The world of entertainment has changed, and we've seen that, William, and we're sort of impacted and suffering from that.
But people may be reading more.
We're reading more, listening more. Both things are good. But
I'm now buying hard copy books, which I never did before because I was always on a plane and didn't want to carry them. So it's good for the printing business.
And of course the ebooks that people can pick up.
Absolutely.
That you have recently completed. So thank you both, and thank you all for watching and being such a great audience. Sorry we couldn't.
Send me your email if I don't have it already. I think I may, but let's get it.
I will do that.
Okay.
We encourage you to buy the books of our speakers, and these are available through the Boulder Bookstore within the United States and Full Circle within India. Once again, we'd like to thank our official partner. Do remember to log back on tomorrow, the last day of JLF Colorado 2020, to watch the amazing session starting 6:15 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 8:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and 5:15 p.m. Pacific Time. And of course, 6:45 a.m. Indian Standard Time. Thank you all. Stay masked, stay safe, stay negative.
I would call the Jaipur Literature Festival a living library, or perhaps even a library of life. Do join us as we share the excitement of ideas and of debate and dialogue, of the adventures of science, of the joys of poetry and music, the consolations of philosophy, the essence of literature and of life.
much about the festival in India, the scale of it, the energy of it, and I just love the fact that there is this effort to bring it to other cities in the world.
It's a variety of topics. It's meaningful. I'm just excited. I'm feeling like I've learned a lot to think about, and I appreciate JLF coming here.
Going forward, it would be a very good thing to do for the community to have this event on an annual basis.
I think that when you hear so many different voices and perspectives about the South Asian diaspora and many other issues, you learn that there's a lot of history that you're not taught every day, and I think that that's important to bring in today's world.
I was actually really surprised by the camaraderie I experienced here and the way that people at JLF, both attendees and other panelists, seem to really connect profoundly to literature and care about it.
In 2020, our live version of JLF has been laid to waste because of COVID-19. However, nothing's going to stop us from coming in the way of bringing our writers and speakers to you in Boulder, Colorado, Houston, New York, and Toronto, Canada.
Teamwork Arts, bringing India to the world and the world to India through Indian art and culture for over 30 years. One of Teamwork Arts' signature events, the Z Jaipur Literature Festival, is the world's largest free festival of its kind. With daily interactive sessions, lively debate and dialogue, and international music performances every night, it's no wonder the festival attracts over 500,000 visitors a year. The Jaipur Bookmark, an international B2B event for the publishing industry, happens during the Z Jaipur Literature Festival and sees a confluence of publishers, writers, and literary agents. Teamwork Arts, producers of the Z Jaipur Literature Festival, have taken the flavor of the festival to international shores with vibrant events in the UK, Australia, and the US. Teamwork Arts takes India's artistic diversity to the world with almost 12 festivals of India across continents in a stunning array in over 40 cities. A feast for the senses, these are spectacles of dance, music, cinema, theatre, literature, and so much more. In each of these places, Teamwork Arts' colourful festivals of India are the high points of the annual cultural calendars, be it Confluence in Australia, India by the Bay in Hong Kong, India by the Nile in Egypt, Ion India in Chicago, Shared History in South Africa, India in the Sunshine City in Zimbabwe, Edinburgh Fringe Festival, Kala Utsavam in Singapore, Sarang in South Korea, festivals in Abu Dhabi, Shanghai, Sweden. The list is dizzying. The Jazz India Circuit is an endeavor by Teamwork Arts to spread the word and sound of jazz across the country. The 2017-18 season, 4 festivals across 3 cities featuring over 25 stellar artists from India and around the world, including Jojo Mayer and Nerve, drummer-singer Jameson Ross, and Dave Weckel, who collaborated with the talented Mohini Day. The Mahindra Kabira Festival celebrates the spirit, lyric and verse of the 15th century mystic poet Kabir in his birthplace, the historic city of Varanasi. Kabir's poetry is about inclusiveness. Mahindra Kabira brings to music lovers an unforgettable experience of listening to leading exponents of the classical Banaras Gharana and rich folk traditions of music on the legendary banks of the mighty river Ganges, along with sessions on art and literature, specially curated walks with famous local residents and delectable local cuisine. Sacred celebrates the spiritual through music and its ability to heal. International artists collaborate with world music exponents from India amongst the most incredible desert settings on the banks of the Pushkar Lake. Heritage walks, meditation, talks and workshops are part of this weekend experience. Teamwork Arts so promotes and recognizes the best of Indian theatre through the Mahindra Excellence in Theatre Awards. The Meta Week in Delhi is an enthralling showcase of the 10 best nominated plays shortlisted from numerous entries received from across the country and across languages. The Meta Lifetime Achievement Award has been presented to leading lights of India's theatre industry. For the young and the young at heart, the Ishara International Puppet Theatre Festival brings local and international performances to audiences across several Indian cities. While the multi-city Kahani Festival features interactive storytelling sessions and workshops championing the power of imagination. Bollywood Love Story, a musical. Our international touring productions such as Bollywood Extravaganza and Flamenco India have sold out shows across Europe, Egypt, Russia and Spain. Expressions International Contemporary Dance Festival showcases Indian and international productions, bringing together several dance genres for Indian audiences. Teamwork Arts, celebrating the arts. For more information, visit www.teamworkarts.com.
I think everywhere I've ever lived, I always looked for the library. They come to the library because they want to be with people.
Corporations are not people in the library. People are people, right? And so being able to come in and participate and learn and control that learning experience is what we offer to the community. And that's a beautiful thing. It can develop into something amazing.
We want them to recognize that they have the agency and the potential to create change and have a voice.
To become what they hope to be, to empower them to realize their aspirations.
No matter who they are, no matter what age they are, no matter what their background or ability is.
We're going to learn together, right?
And you know what? Not just me, because I want to create together, but I think we want to create together.
Give us your knowledge, give us what you do best. Give us your culture, give us good feedback, give us bad feedback, give us any feedback. Let us grow with you. Just come and ask too.
Ask a librarian. We're all here waiting to help you.
To work together, to collaborate, and to come up with a larger, louder voice as a collective.
We are bolder together.
We are okay, wait.
Somos bolder juntos.
We are bolder.
Bolder?
Bolder together.
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 We're bolder together, we're bolder together.
Hello everyone and welcome to Kahani Online, where you discover the magic of storytelling in all its forms.
Very special guest with a very special story.
Please welcome actor and author Soha Ali Khan.
The story that I've chosen is called Someday. Here it is. And it's by Alison McGee and Peter H. Reynolds. It's a story that I've read many times to Inaya.
Everyone, grab a pencil, eraser and a notebook
as we are about to learn how to write short stories.
That's very simple. All you have to remember is 5 points.
Grumpy, we have a special story for you that dates back to the year 1962. Major Shaitan Singh Bhatti and his soldiers.
चीन ने भारत पर हमला बोला था। ये लड़ाई पूरा 1 महीना चली थी।
Our storyteller today is Katrina Zail, all the way from Lithuania in
Europe.
Yes, in Europe. And she's going to tell us about some strange and fascinating mythological creatures.
Today I will introduce you all to Lithuanian mythology. I will show you our modern world full of hidden mythical creatures.
I will narrate to you an episode from one of our oldest epics, the Ramayana.
We'll be waiting to hear from you. Until next time, bye-bye.